G'day, welcome to Walking Through the Word. My name's James Hornby. I'm the lead minister of the All Saints Anglican Network. So join me as we walk through the Word each week, unpacking a portion of the Bible, and feel free to comment, to ask questions, to get involved, and we'll work through this together. I'm so glad you can join us. Duck inside as we get on to the next episode. Welcome to Looking Through Luke as we explore together the account of the life and ministry of Jesus according to Luke. Today we continue through the first chapter as we ask the question that Luke asks, who is Jesus? As we examine the evidence, Luke writes to Theophilus, we have the benefit of seeing before us the information that Luke gives him so that we too can make our own decision about the truth of Jesus, his claims, his life, who he is, what he's done and what he's promised to do. We're in chapter 1. Let me read from verse 26. In the 6th month of Elizabeth's pregnancy, God sent the angel Gabriel to Nazareth, a town in Galilee, to a virgin pledged to be married to a man named Joseph, a descendant of David. The virgin's name was Mary. The angel went to her and said, "Greetings, you who are highly favoured. The Lord is with you." Mary was greatly troubled at his words and wondered what kind of greeting this might be. But the angel said to her, "Do not be afraid, Mary. You have found favour with God. You will conceive and give birth to a son, and you are to call him Jesus. He will be great and will be called the Son of the Most High. The Lord God will give him the throne of his father David, and he will reign over Jacob's descendants forever. His kingdom will never end." So here we have another announcement, an announcement of a birth. Gabriel, the angel, has been busy. First, it was to Zechariah in the temple at Jerusalem. Now we read that his wife Elizabeth has been pregnant for 6 months, and he appears again with a similar message, a message to Mary. And in this message, he will announce to her that she too will be pregnant, that she too will give birth to someone who will be special, someone who will be set apart. Well, there's a lot of similarities to this announcement and the announcement that Gabriel brings to Zechariah, but there's also a tremendous contrast. See, the announcement about the birth of John happens in the temple, in the holy place, in the holy city, in the midst of public worship. Gabriel appears to Zechariah. But here, this announcement to Mary takes place to a poor, a humble woman in a little rural backwater called Galilee. Out of the way, private, flying under the radar. I love how Darrell Bock puts it. He says, "The great God of heaven sends the gift of salvation to humans in a serene, understated package of simplicity." This announcement, which heralds the coming of the Messiah, Israel's long-awaited deliverer, couldn't happen in a more nondescript way. Well, what do we read and what do we discover here? Firstly, we discover that Mary is young. She's a virgin. She has no sexual experience. She is pledged to be married. She's engaged to Joseph. Jewish marriages had a 2-stage process. The first stage was a witnessed agreement to marry. And at this point, they would be considered legally married. Mary would be referred to at this moment as Joseph's wife, even though they're not actually living together, even though the marriage ceremony hasn't yet taken place. And about a year later, the husband would come and take his wife, and they would have a marriage ceremony, and then he would take her home and they would consummate their marriage. Well, we don't know how old Mary is, but we do know that girls as young as 12 were pledged to be married. So we know she's young, we know she's a virgin, we know that she's pledged, she's engaged to Joseph. Legally, she's married, but that marriage hasn't yet been consummated. And the angel appears to Mary and says to her, "Greetings, you who are highly favoured." Mary, says the angel, is a favoured one. And what that simply means is that she is the recipient of God's grace. We don't yet know what that means or what it looks like, but God has, in his kindness, bestowed his grace upon her. And the angel says that makes her favoured. Well, Mary's response to this is interesting. We read that she was greatly troubled. At one level, it's not surprising, is it? I think if a celestial being suddenly appeared in front of me and greeted me, I would be troubled. I would wonder what on earth is going on. To be troubled here means to be greatly perplexed. This is not your ordinary run-of-the-mill experience. She's intensely curious. This is an out-of-the-box, once-in-a-lifetime moment. There's no point of reference to try and work out what's happening. She's troubled at his words, and we read she wondered what kind of greeting this might be. Now, you and I probably don't have, like Mary, too much experience with angelic greetings. I don't know if there's a particular means. I don't know if angels get to choose from a number of set greetings. We'll go with greeting C today. She wondered what kind of greeting this might be. Well, it's unusual. It's highly unusual. But I want us to look at that word, wondered. She wondered. It's actually from the Greek word dialogizomai, which means to think through, to ponder, to examine. It's interesting that Mary's response to this highly unusual event is to think furiously, to engage her brain. Again, we have these moments in our lives, maybe these shocking experiences. It would be a shock. What do? We stop thinking, we freeze, fight or flight. But Mary, she's thinking furiously. Again, this is another example from Luke of how people throughout this story are engaged and examining the evidence to try and ask the question of who Jesus is. Well, Mary doesn't know yet what's happening, but she has this angel before her, and he says that she is a favoured one. She is the recipient of God's grace. And she's perplexed, she's trying to work out what it means, and so she engages with this, and we read that she thinks furiously about it. She's really trying to make sense of it, to process it, to understand it. The Lord is with you, says Gabriel. He has poured his grace on her. But what's going to happen? Well, we don't know at this point. But this favour of God is freely bestowed upon her. And we read this story, and as we'll discover over the coming weeks, Mary is a remarkable human being in the way that she responds, not just to this message, but to all that God has for her. And this bestowing of grace upon her is actually taken by Luke and other New Testament writers, and in the future it becomes a way of describing the free grace that's bestowed upon God's people, upon the church. It becomes a way of describing what God has done for his people out of his good pleasure. And this moment of God freely bestowing his grace upon Mary, his favour upon her, becomes a pointer to what God will do to all, for all, who trust in his Son, the Lord Jesus. It's a picture of those who receive God's grace on the basis of his action. Well, Gabriel says to her, "You will conceive and give birth to a son, and you ought to call him Jesus." Now, this whole book is about the life and ministry of Jesus. Here's the first entrant of the hero into the story. What does Gabriel have to say about Jesus? What should we be looking for as we examine the gospel, the story, the good news of Jesus from Luke? Well, this is what he says. "He will be great, and he will be called the Son of the Most High. The Lord will give him the throne of his father David, and he will reign over Jacob's descendants forever. His kingdom will never end." Well, they're incredible words, and I'm sure as Mary was furiously processing the fact that she's about to conceive and give birth to a son, these words, who doesn't want to hear that their child is going to be great? Who doesn't want to hear that their child has a spectacular future ahead of them? But this is no ordinary proclamation, is it? There are two particular things that we need to pay attention to with respect to what Gabriel says about Mary's son, Jesus. Firstly, he's going to have a position. It's not any ordinary position. It's a regal position. He's actually going to be a king. He's going to be a king just as his descendant David was. In fact, he's going to, according to Gabriel, he's going to receive the throne of his father David. So he's going to have a position, a regal position. He's going to be king, but he's also going to have a reign. And this reign will be over Jacob's descendants, and, says Gabriel, it will be forever. His kingdom will never end. So friends, as we look through the story of Jesus, as we're introduced to the hero of the story, we know two things from the beginning. Firstly, that he will have a kingdom, that he will be a king, and his reign over his kingdom will be forever, eternal, everlasting. That should tell us something about this king already. This will be no ordinary king, and his kingdom is no ordinary kingdom. But for now, for us, it's worth considering what it looks like for us to receive God's grace. Mary is highly favoured. She's done nothing to deserve it. She hasn't asked for it. She's been going quietly about her business. She's a peasant, a humble woman of little means. She's a nobody. She lives in a rural backwater in a town that very few have heard of. God has seen her, and God has bestowed upon her his favour, his kindness. He has taken the initiative towards her. And friends, that's so true of who God is. And as we'll see through the gospel, God continually does that, and the means by which he does that will ultimately be through his son Jesus. You don't need to earn God's favour. You don't need to go looking for it. You don't need to ask God for it. You don't need to beg for it. In fact, God freely bestows it upon you. His kindness is freely given to you. What is his favour? Well, his favour is his grace given to you freely. How do we receive his grace? Well, friends, that's the message of this gospel. Ultimately, it will be through his son. Next week, we're going to explore Mary's answer to this proclamation. How can it be? an incredible question to ask when you're a young virgin girl. Until then, have a great week, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks so much for watching, and if you made a comment, thanks for participating. Open to suggestions too, so let us know what would be helpful. If you did get something out of it, I'd love it if you just like and subscribe to our channel. Hit the like bell notification, hit the like. What it does, it really helps the YouTube algorithm and gets these out to more and more people. So we're not trying to build a massive following or a massive channel. We're actually just trying to communicate the truth of who Jesus is. And if that's something that resonates with you, we'd love your support by doing those two simple things. Thank you. See ya.